Hey everybody, and welcome to the Movie Burner podcast, the new weekly podcast from Movie Burner Entertainment, where we discuss all the latest movie news and speculation that's piqued our interest. We'll also do short reviews and a profile of our favourite actor or actress towards the end. But what have we got first, Stephen?
I think the first thing we should speak about, John, is this new Mutants trailer, which comes out on the 13th of April 2018. It's going to be a big year for Fox and the X-Men franchise. I was very surprised by this trailer from the kickoff. You know, a very dark tone. It looks like it's going into the horror genre as well, which I was very surprised about. You know, we're not used to seeing this in X-Men films. You know, and I think with the success of Logan and Deadpool, I think Fox have appeared to have taken notice of these two movies going in a different direction from the usual X-Men canon. You know, I've also heard that this film is part of the X-Men universe, and James McAvoy will make an appearance as Charles Xavier, so very exciting times.
Yeah, I mean, I love the horror setting. As a big fan of horrors in general, that's always a big positive for me. But I also think it's definitely a route they have to go down with superhero films now, because with the sheer number of them being released every year, there is a possibility for viewer fatigue to maybe kick in, and you know, they're going to have to start maybe expanding and testing the boundaries with these films, and this foray into the horror genre definitely marks an interesting development. Hopefully they'll continue to go doing this with other superhero films in the future. Well,
I know that we were talking just off air a couple of minutes ago, John. We were talking about the director, Josh Boone, and you know, both of us are not too familiar with his work. Yeah. I actually have seen Fault in Our Stars, which is actually a very good drama, kind of romantic, but it's a very good film, very well written, very well made film, you know, and it'll be interesting to see how this film will pan out with him. You know, I know that he's also been announced to direct the new Stephen King's The Stand, which is one of my personal favourite stories from Stephen King, so I'm looking forward to that as well. But apart from that, I know that he did the film Stuck in Love, but apart from that, I don't really know too much about the man.
Yeah, I'm the same. I'm not really up to date with his filmography at all. But in terms of this trailer, I think even from people who are big fans of comic books in general, which admittedly I'm not, I never had the luxury of being brought up around about comic books when I was young, they're even saying that it's quite ambiguous in its tone and the way it's portraying things. There wasn't a lot of emphasis on the powers. It's been left pretty much wide open to interpretation. I've read up on it. I'm not a big fan of the New Mutants. I never really heard of it up until maybe a few weeks ago when I seen news of this film. I think we actually spoke about it maybe last week, actually.
Yes.
But I've read up on it, and I find a couple of the theories quite interesting. Starting with the "Did you know baby rattlesnakes are more dangerous than adult once they haven't learned how to control how much venom they secrete?" That quote, I think it's near the beginning of the trailer. This actually opens up quite an interesting possibility for the film. I know, having done my research, that it's based on the Demonic Bear saga, which was a 3-part issue from the early 80s. And in that, the character Danielle Danny Moonstar, played by Blue Hunt in this new film, she has a power which basically turns nightmarish fears into physical form, and she has an on-off fight along with the New Mutants to sort of see off a demonic bear which apparently kills her parents. But then I think at the end we then find out that the parents have actually transformed into this bear, but she doesn't discover this until the very end. And I think this is what the film's going to be based on, so it's opening up an interesting possibility with that quote, as I said at the start, that perhaps she's responsible for a lot of the manifestations and things we're seeing in the trailer. I don't know, but what's your thoughts, Stephen? I'm not sure.
Well, the other thing that you touched on, John, was the mutant powers not being shown in the trailer, and this is quite a gamble on Fox's part to introduce this New Mutants story or canon to an audience that might not be familiar with this comic book story. And I said it's a gamble, but from what I gather from it, it's designed in a way for anyone that's not familiar, but at the same time you really do have to have a wee bit of knowledge on the X-Men films, I think. And as you said, they didn't show any of their powers. It portrayed more of a horror movie than it did an X-Men movie, and I don't think this is a misdirection from the filmmakers. I think this is going to be the road they are going down with this film, and I think that part of it is going to play big in this story.
Yeah, well, as I say, I just briefly touched on the demonic bear thing. What they then went on to say with that was that it was one of the few times in that New Mutants comic book run where they actually, it was the themes were solely on horror. I think they says it opened up, and for the most part it was quite varied in the genres it touched upon. It went to sci-fi, it went to gladiatorial genres, but this was the only time in the run that it did touch on horror. So I find it interesting that they're opening up this potential new franchise with a horror based genre.
Yeah, I think as well that the introduction of a very young cast as well suggests to me that this is going to be played out over a number of sequels. You know, if all goes well with the box office numbers. I'm just looking at the cast just now. You know, Anya Taylor-Joy, Macy Williams, Alice Braga, and Charlie Heaton. You know, it's a strong young cast, and they're all Hollywood's hottest young actors at the moment.
Oh yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan of Maisie Williams. As a massive fan of Game of Thrones, I think I touched upon that last week when I was talking about Gwendoline Christie. She plays Arya Stark in Game of Thrones. Probably one of my favourite characters, but at least top 3 anyway, alongside the Hound and Tyrion Lannister. I think she's an intelligent, quite a funny young actress, and just with her involvement in this film, that certainly piqued my interest. As she says, Anya Taylor-Joy playing magic in it. She was in The Witch, another film I've watched recently that I thoroughly enjoyed. That was a fantastic, suffocating, claustrophobic horror, and she was without a shadow of a doubt the best performer in it. She's a young actress, something coming, as you said, and I find it interesting the route they are going down. It's clear that they're going to be creating a franchise for the future here. I think Alice Braga as well, I think you touched upon her. Yeah. She was in a couple of films I've seen, I Am Legend, and also The Last Right, starring Anthony Hopkins. That was quite an underrated horror film. So I find it not only interesting that they are going down the route of youth, but they're also picking up characters who are quite familiar with the horror genre. I think the other one, as I mentioned earlier, playing Danielle Moonstar, Blue Hunt, she was also in a TV series which I haven't watched, but I'm quite interested in now that I've looked it up. The Originals, that's again, I think, vampire based, horror based. So they're picking up these young actors and actresses who have got experience within the horror genre, and I think that'll play out well for the film going forward.
Yeah, and the other actor that I mentioned, Charlie Heaton, I have saw a film that he was in this year called Shut-In, and I was very impressed with him. The film itself didn't impress me, but sometimes, you know, you watch a film and you're not that impressed with maybe the storyline or you know, the plot or anything like that, but he was a standout in it, so it'll be very interesting to see how he gets on in this movie. Just another thing, you know, it appears that they are pushing the boundaries in the tone of this trailer from the kick-off, and I'm looking forward to this movie and X-Men Dark Phoenix, which comes out in 2018. 2018 is going to be a big year for Fox and the X-Men franchise. Yeah,
and going back to the trailer itself, actual visuals, I was really impressed with the visuals. A couple of things caught my attention. Was that the faces coming through the wall. Yeah. I thought that looked incredibly eerie. I'm not one for really being caught out with jump scares, so the fiery hand on like the machine didn't really catch me, but there was a couple of really good visuals in there.
But I think when you're not expecting it from an X-Men film, it can be quite, I wouldn't say shocking, that's probably overkill, but it certainly did surprise me, you know, the tone of this trailer, and I think that's down to, I'll reiterate this, I think that's down to Logan and Deadpool. Logan, for me, went in a totally different direction to previous X-Men films. It was almost like a western, and the mutant side of it was very underplayed. I think it's going to be the same in this movie as well, and the same with Deadpool as well. Breaking the fourth wall, that kind of thing, had never been done, you know, in an X-Men film, and obviously the humour as well from that film. So I think these two films have opened the door for that franchise going in a different direction, and the audience accepting that it can go down another road.
Just one final thing I'd like to see on the New Mutant thing before we move on is going back to the Danielle Moonstar character, I think she is definitely going to be the key. Her and the lady that plays Magic, Anya Taylor-Joy. I think these two characters are going to be vital to the story going forward. I think with the whole manifestation thing, again, as I touched upon earlier, I think in the comics they say Dr. Reyes, who's overseeing things at the abandoned hospital, they say in the comics she's actually a protector. So I do think there's a slight bit of misdirection in there where they're kind of portraying her as an evil sort of a character who's maybe manipulating the young mutants. I think in the actual comics, and if they're following the comic release that I was talking about earlier, she's actually a protector. If these manifestations are down to the two characters I mentioned before, then it's possible that once again it's like an origin story, similar to Peter Parker in Homecoming, where it's young teenagers still maturing, trying to learn how to harness and control their powers, and what we're seeing is their actual powers bleeding out unknowingly, and this is causing all the problems they're seeing with what the miners seen. I know the character Sam Guthrie, aka Cannonball, is one potential example of this, where he actually, in the comic series, he gets his powers from a mine collapsing perhaps, and I think he inadvertently kills miners. And I found it interesting that one of the manifestations was actually a group of miners attacking. So I think it's clear that there's a bit of misdirection here, that it's fundamentally going to be about a young group of mutants learning their skills, maturing as people, under perhaps the more kindly and protective guidance, supervision, for want of a better phrase, of Reyes. And yeah, much like in Homecoming, learning to adapt to their new status as superheroes. But I think that's us just about.
Yeah, I think it'll just end on, I think it's a good period for the X-Men franchise, after the disappointment of Apocalypse, which I didn't think was too bad, but coming off the back of Days of Future Past, it was always going to be a hard act to follow, because that's still probably one of the best X-Men films out there. But after Logan and after Deadpool, it's exciting times for the franchise. Yeah, it was a busy week for trailers, and obviously that trailer was the standout up till the Black Panther trailer dropped. This film is released on the 16th of February next year. It's going to be a great year next year, John. Yeah. And right away, I've got to put my hands up. I don't know too much about this character other than his little cameo he had in Civil War, which intrigued me. Director Ryan Coogler, who is famous for Fruitvale Station and Creed, and he's worked with Michael B. Jordan. A little more insight to what the movie is about than the last trailer, John. I love the tone of it. I love the music. It's very reminiscent of Creed, the style of it. The CGI as well really impressed me. The look of Wakanda looks amazing, and it looks to me Martin Freeman might be getting a bigger role in this movie as well. Yeah,
I mean, even with the opening narration from Freeman's character, I'm paraphrasing a little bit, but he says he's seen some wondrous things, but not quite anything like this. I think that, following just with the visuals alone, certainly backs that statement up. Marvel seem to continue to tap in seeming never-ending gold mine of material for their films out of obviously their comic books. The visuals are beyond gorgeous, as he says. The Secret of Wakanda, very reminiscent of Themyscira from Wonder Woman, with the whole holographic protective barrier thing. So credit to the cinematographer for that one. I loved the mismatch of the older and the modern buildings, and just the way it felt lived in. It felt like a busy, vibrant world, and even just that scene of the streets with the people out doing their everyday thing, and the railway line floating above it. It felt real and lived in, much like what I felt George Lucas was trying to do in the original Star Wars films, but they nailed in the recent Rogue One release.
Yeah.
But another example of the visuals, I thought the Purple Aura scene, where Black Panther, I think he's called, I'm not too sure on the character's name, I think it might be T'Challa. It's not one of these names I've heard spoken, but him walking through the desert scenery at night and seeing the panthers and the trees, I thought that was absolutely stunning. The waterfalls and the sinkholes at Warrior Falls, I believe it's called, it's a natural wonder and a sacred site within Wakanda. That looked incredible. Ryan Coogler, you touched upon him. I think he's a phenomenally talented director.
I mean, you've saw Fruitvale Station. I've not actually saw that yet.
Yeah, fantastic film.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Creed is one of my favourite boxing films of recent times. I felt introducing that franchise again, the Rocky franchise I suppose we could call it, was really a big step. I thought Coogler's direction in the film was very similar to the first Rocky movie. I know that he's not coming back for the second Creed film, which is a bit disappointing, but he certainly looks like he's nailed this film anyway.
Yeah. Just the cast in general in this film, it's actually taken me aback. Much like yourself, I didn't know much about the character or the film. I've done a little bit of research, so hopefully I know a little bit more now. But in terms of the cast, I'm absolutely blown away with the cast, to be honest with you. Chadwick Boseman, again, another fantastic young actor. Yeah. Starred in the James Brown autobiographical film, Get On Up. I thought that was a fantastic film. I'm a big James Brown fan. He's a lot bigger than the James Brown was, and yet he managed to show a real work ethic to get down the fairly difficult dance moves that Brown done. He also starred in 42. Amazing portrayal was Jackie Robinson, a baseball player who crossed the colour divide in the 1940s and played for the Dodgers. As you said, Michael B. Jordan, incredible actor. One of the best young actors of today, in my opinion. His presence as Eric Killmonger's certainly going to be promising for the film. That golden Jaguar suit that he had in certain scenes, I thought that was absolutely epic looking. Even the body markings. I mean, I can go through the whole cast here and it's astonishing.
One of the standout actors in the cast that I've noticed that I didn't notice in the trailer was Forrest Whitaker, and he's playing a character called Zuri. Don't know much about him, but it shows you the depth, and the calibre of where this film's going with the actors.
Yeah, I actually read an article about Forrest Whitaker in this because I couldn't believe he was in it. I hadn't heard anything about it. And one of the producers, I think, or writers, likened his role to the Obi-Wan Kenobi of the Black Panther universe. He's a spiritual wise man that apparently offers guidance and advice to the new king, T'Challa. So yeah, his involvement's going to be interesting.
I do hope his involvement is a little bit more than his involvement in Rogue One, where he played Saw Gerrera. I was looking forward to seeing this character actually, and I know that he played the character that has played a big part in the animated series Rebels. Was it Clone Wars? I can't remember.
Yeah, I think it was Rebels. Yeah, it was Rebels.
And it was very disappointing to see that his character and obviously the actor being very limited screen time. But it'll be interesting to see how it goes with this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I'll quickly touch on the rest of the cast because I think this is really one of Black Panther's strong points here. I think, along with the visuals, obviously, and a couple of other tidbits, I do think the cast is going to be the real heartbeat of this film. As I say, Lupita Nyong'o, I heard her described as a James Bond and a Bond girl, all in one, a fierce warrior and an ally of Panthers. As we say, Whitaker, Daniel Kaluuya from Get Out, brilliant young actor. Danai Gurira plays Michonne in Walking Dead, another fantastic actress. I think we touched upon Andy Serkis last week. You were talking about him as Ulysses Claw. He's looking absolutely dapper with the hair. I did touch on him having great hair, and I have to take back, he's not bad looking in this film. I called him ugly last week.
The thing about Andy Serkis as a Claw, it does intrigue me, and I'm looking forward to seeing his character more. I know we got a bit of it in Civil War, which I actually forgot about, but it looks like he's got a bigger part in this one, judging by the trailer, and those action sequences that he was involved in the trailer really blew me away.
Oh yeah, especially that one with the gun actually coming out of his prosthetic hand. In terms of story, I've heard one of the writers on the film actually describe it as having a lot of influence from The Godfather. The story itself with T'Challa, it's obviously his father dying, him having to rise to the position of king within Wakanda, fighting off rival factions and tribes to solidify and maintain his rule. And you can see this with what appears to be a couple of villains in the film. M'Baku, I believe his name is. I'm not completely clued up on all the various names. As I said, I didn't really know anything about it until recently. But also Killmonger as well, Michael B. Jordan's character, and them working together. I don't know whether they're going to be working together or whether it's going to be a sort of onslaught from multiple threats. I know Killmonger's teaming up with Claw, Andy Serkis' character, so it'll be interesting to see how they balance these different villains and work it into the story.
I think the involvement, one of the more experienced actors in this film, Angela Bassett, who, you know, I remember her from Boys in the Hood and Malcolm X. I don't know what it is. She doesn't age, this lady, you know, but she's playing Ramonda in this film, and it shows you the caliber of experienced actors, you know, blended with the you know, these new actors that are coming through in the Marvel universe, and I can't wait to see this film.
Yeah, and just the way that I think Marvel are just, I don't know what it is with them. They just seem to be hitting gold every single release in the last year or so, or maybe even the last 10 years. Yeah. The way that this film's going to, I just get the feel it's going to blend into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, much like every other film. But
I think the difference, though, John, with this, you know, blending into this universe, I think it's going to be more of the Ant-Man or the Doctor Strange. It's not going to be sort of, you know, an intertwined story that you know, Captain America's involving the likes of Tony Stark playing big roles in these kind of films. Maybe further down the line I think they will, but I think Marvel have cracked it with these not so well known, you know, that might be an injustice, but you think of Marvel heroes, your ultimate thoughts are Hulk, Thor, Captain America, Iron Man, Spider-Man now as well, and I think that these characters need their own movies. I felt that about Doctor Strange. I felt that about Ant-Man, which I didn't know anything about, and it's one of my favourite Marvel films. And I think this will be, you know, given the same treatment, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, I mean, just touching on what you said there about it being independent of the universe. I heard an interesting thing where they described, I believe, that it's the sister of Black Panther. I think her name's Shuri. They described her as being the Tony Stark of Wakanda. Where she's supremely intelligent, she engineers all the weaponry and the suits, and I thought that was quite interesting. It emphasised, as you say, it's a distinct world they've created here, but also whilst it fits seamlessly in, it's a living, breathing, separate entity, and it's interesting the way they're doing it. As you say, it's touching on it with Ant-Man and also Doctor Strange. These are very separate films, very separate worlds that they're managing to incorporate into the wider universe. But I'm just quickly touching back on the visuals. One thing I want to say, I think it was very reminiscent of, as I says, Themyscira and Wonder Woman, but also Asgard and Thor. Yeah. And with Thor also coming out in the next week or so, I think it is. I'm not actually sure when it releases. Is it a week or 2 weeks?
I think it's in the next few weeks, yeah.
I think it'll open up an interesting possibility of which film will actually do better. Will Black Panther do better at the box office, or will Thor do better? I've heard a lot of good things from Thor. Once again, they've gone down a different route, very comedy heavy, so it'll be interesting to see.
Yeah, Thor comes out on the 2nd of November, so we're only a week or so away from that, but it will be interesting to see how that movie goes, and somewhere down the line we'll probably be talking about that anyway. But as I said, it's going to be a big year. You know, last week was a big week for trailers. And this certainly was one of the standout ones, and I'm looking forward to this. And it's at that time of year as well. Logan came out, I think, round about the same time this year. You know, late January, early February, and it's a good time to just drop that movie into the public domain, and I'm looking forward to it. Yeah. You know, going from those two blockbuster trailers, blockbuster movies, you know, we're moving into a little trailer that dropped on Netflix last week, which came as a total surprise for me, was Jim and Andy, The Great Beyond trailer. This premieres on Netflix on November 17th, and anyone that's not familiar with this, it's a documentary on the Jim Carrey film Man on the Moon, which came out in 1999, where Jim Carrey portrayed his idol Andy Kaufman. You know, for nearly 20 years, the behind the scenes footage has been withheld from the public domain until now. If you go and see the trailer, Jim Carrey will explain the reason for that. But it was a very short trailer, John, but anyone that saw Man on the Moon will know what this trailer and what this documentary is going to be about. It's about Jim Carrey, and it's about Andy Kaufman, and it's about both of them becoming the one person. Yeah,
I mean, I've actually just watched it a couple of days ago to sort of reacquaint myself with the film, and I actually wasn't aware that he went full method, full Christian Bale on this. I found it captivating the way he get right into the character, even the looks. Watching the film again, it's a fantastic film, fantastic accurate portrayal. I'm obviously not fully aware of all the intricacies of Andy Kaufman. He was a little bit before my time, but I've YouTubed him since, and I feel he was on point with the performance. It's criminal that he didn't get an Oscar nomination for this. In this trailer, I'm really looking forward to seeing this. I'm really looking forward to seeing how he got on behind the scenes.
Yeah, I think when the trailer did drop, I watched it maybe about 3 or 4 times. Totally fascinated by both actors, and you know, I saw a comparison scene on YouTube as well. Someone had put this video together to compare the scenes of Jim Carrey's performance and Andy Kaufman's original performances, and a lot of the comments saying that Carrey was maybe hamming up slightly, you know that, but you have to remember that he's portraying the character of Andy Kaufman in a very much film-like version. You've got to understand that Andy Kaufman was a very unique individual, very original, and sometimes I think for actors it's very hard to imitate originality and spontaneous behaviour, and I thought Jim Carrey actually did a really good job of it. It's one of my favourite films of all time, not just a Jim Carrey film, but it's one of those films that I can go back to maybe every 5-6 years and enjoy it like it's the first time I've watched it.
Yeah, I mean, I think those comments, I've seen those comments because I actually watched the video today as well. I think they've been a bit harsh. As you can see in the trailer, they certainly nailed the intricacies of the character. He had the passive Kaufman, if you like, not the showman Kaufman, nailed. I feel the directors probably told him to turn it up a little notch or so. Just a couple of scenes that spring to my mind from the film itself. I know we're not actually discussing the film, it's the trailer for the behind the scenes of the film, but just to really emphasise how good this performance was, if you go on and watch this video, the Great Gatsby scene where he's reading the Great Gatsby novel to the crowd, it's incredible. Just the looks, the almost monobrow, the crazed look in the eye, the mental slicked hair, and just the tone of his voice. He's got it down at the Elvis impersonation scene with that ridiculous high pitched voice. He's got it absolutely nailed. I mean, if you've never seen Man in the Moon, I strongly urge you to watch it. It's a fantastic performance.
I think you've got to take the word of someone that knew Andy Kaufman very well, who worked on Taxi with him, was Danny DeVito. It says in the trailer he's just like him. Danny DeVito obviously played George Shapiro in Man in the Moon film, but he also worked alongside Andy Kaufman on Taxi, and if you're getting someone of DeVito's calibre saying that he's very much like him, then you just got to take your word for it. You know, take his word for it. Sorry, you know, and I'm looking forward to it. You know, and the other thing that I thought was quite interesting was that the soundtrack. As you know, John, I've been a big fan of R.E.M. for a long time. The song Man in the Moon, which came out in 1992, was written for Andy Kaufman, and ironically the Great Beyond, which was the other song that featured in the trailer, was written 6 or 7 years apart, but are connected just like the movie and the documentary for the movie. Yeah,
just going back to what you says about DeVito, I actually read an incredible quote from Jerry the King Lawler, who obviously had a bit of a kayfabe, that's a wrestling term if you don't know, rivalry with Kaufman, and I don't know whether it was the 70s or the 80s when he was wrestling women, and it was part of an act, but they weren't in on the act, so it was causing much anger and dissent within the female side of the population. But I found this quote incredible, where he says that he received a phone call around about 98 or 99 from someone that sounded remarkably like Kaufman. He actually thought it was him returning from the grave to give him a call, because if you're not aware of Kaufman himself, there's a bit of a theory going around that he faked or staged his own death, and that he's been keeping it by for 20 or 30 years to come back into the spotlight. And it turns out it was actually Jim Carrey phoning Jerry the King Lawler, and he couldn't believe it. He thought it was the actual real man. So yeah.
They do hint on that in the Man in the Moon movie, where they do leave you hanging whether or not it did pass away or not, which was quite a clever trick to play in the audience. But you know, I'm looking forward to it. There's not much more we can say on this, because we are going to be doing a retro review on Man in the Moon, and we will be doing a written review on the actual documentary once we watch it, so there's not too much more we can say about this. But the trailer did drop, I think it was the 19th of October, and as I said, it came as a great surprise to me. Looking forward to watching it, and I think maybe after I watch the documentary I will go back to watch Man in the Moon again. And with that, this leads us into the segment of the show where we like to talk about an actor, producer, director, and dedicate a wee bit of time to them. This week, it's going to be Jim Carrey. We've just spoke about the upcoming documentary, a little bit about Man in the Moon, but the guy's had some career, John. I'm just looking at his resume here. I almost forget just how many films that he was in, and you're talking about back to back here. You know, you're talking maybe 2 or 3 films per year, and big films as well. I first saw Jim Carrey as, I think it was Johnny Squares in Clint Eastwood's The Deadpool from, I think it was the late 80s. I'm saying I remember him, I only remember him after him becoming more famous to myself, after The Mask and stuff like that, and remembering he was in that, very much similar to Samuel Jackson's role in Coming to America, where I remember the role very well. I remember the character, exactly, and it wasn't until Pulp Fiction came out that I remembered, I've seen this guy before, very similar to Carey's role in the Deadpool. But you know, the guy's done it all. He doesn't have anything more to prove. As a comedic actor, he's done his serious roles as well.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, I think he said one of the best runs as an actor that I can recall seeing, probably from the early 90s right up until the early 2000s. It was year after year he was producing a phenomenal film. I think we touched upon this just before we started this, that he had Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, The Mask, and it was just continual. It was relentless good films. You had a nice mix of slapstick comedy, series.
They were all released in the same year, weren't they?
Yeah, I mean, I think we discussed this. I think he's a massively underrated actor myself. He's shown some incredible versatility over his career. He's delivered some brilliant performances, and I think it seems to be an issue with him getting Oscar nominations. I actually read an interesting article, because I knew we were going to be speaking about him, and I think he's been hindered by the early comedy films that he chose to do. I think he ended up getting typecasted as a comedy actor, and people, certainly critics, tend to overlook the fantastic performances that have came afterwards. And that's not to look down my nose at the likes of The Mask and Dumb and Dumber. I was an incredibly big fan of The Mask as a child. I had all the toys. I watched it dozens upon dozens of times. I absolutely loved Ace Ventura. Dumb and Dumber's in my top 3 comedy films of all time. In fact, it's probably in my top 5 performances of Jim Carrey's. I actually think you could have got an Oscar nomination for that film, but obviously the Academy looks down its nose at comedy films and comedy actors themselves.
I think one of the things that we certainly missed out in the UK was his appearances on in Living Colour, which ran, well, he was in it for about 11 years. You know, in the UK we didn't get that series here, but from obviously watching YouTube clips and that, we get the idea of you know, his performances in Living Colour, and it would have been interesting to watch that over here at the time. You know, when I'm watching back on these kind of things, some of it does appear quite dated, very 90s relevant humour, but the other film that I missed out on, it wasn't until my wife, she bought the DVD 10 years ago, that I didn't even know he was in this film called Earth Girls Are Easy, and it seems to have developed a cult following. But as you said, you know, the release of Ace Ventura and its sequel the following year, When Nature Calls, which I actually thought was a better film. It kind of set the tone from early on in these movies as a comedic actor, and it wasn't really till you know, 1996 The Cable Guy came out. It got slaughtered, absolutely slaughtered. There was talk about the fee that he was receiving for the movie at the time, which I think is irrelevant. Audience members should get into these films watching the performance and nothing else, not judging actors and what they're getting paid. I thought it was a great film. It was very dark, and I think this is where he might have suffered, because people were used to Ace Ventura, The Mask, Lloyd Christmas, you know, and when he played this role, which just came off the back of, I think it was Batman Forever, when he played the Riddler, which on that film as well, I think it was one of the better points in that film. But I liked The Cable Guy, and that took him into the late 1990s with films like Liar Liar, and I think one that we can't forget is The Truman Show.
Yeah, I mean, I never really disliked his performances in Riddler. I thought he was actually, as you said, one of the better parts of that film. And Liar Liar is one of my favourite Jim Carrey films. In fact, the one scene in particular that always springs to mind when I think of that is the boardroom scene where he's taking down and insulting, because obviously he can't lie. He's insulting all his executives and bosses and stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those films, you know, that I can leave that film maybe 5 or 6 years, and then when I do come back to it, I forget how funny it is.
Yeah.
The other funny thing about that film is the outtakes. This kind of shows personality you're dealing with Jim Carrey, that the outtakes in that film are just as funny as the film itself.
Making origami swans in the courtroom and stuff.
I mean, he has the cast and the crew all in stitches just with his, spontaneousness, and it shows the talents of the man.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But as you also touched upon, he definitely was. He was hindered for the almost boisterous overacting he'd done in early films. People became accustomed to that as being connected with Jim Carrey. They expected that from his films. And like you say, The Cable Guy, fantastic film, much darker than what he'd done before. But in regards to The Truman Show, I've actually got my top 5 performances for Jim Carrey written down here, and The Truman Show is actually number 1. I think it was, I actually believe it was one of the biggest robberies, him not getting the recognition he deserved and nomination for Best Leading Actor in his portrayal as Truman Bunbank. A fantastic film. Even within the film, it's got parts comedy, parts seriousness. Obviously the incredibly annoying best friend that keeps popping up at like 3 in the morning.
With the briskies, that's right.
Yeah, with the briskies. But yeah, just as you say, it didn't. I never had the luxury of watching this when I was younger. I don't know why, but it was probably about the mid 2000s when I first seen it, and as you says, it does leave an effect on you. It makes you question, obviously, the way society's going these days with all the reality TV thing. They were really ahead of the times and what they were portraying. I just thought the performance was incredible, and it was an absolute robbery. He never got an Oscar nomination, but of course he won the Golden Globe, so he did get some recognition. But I don't know if you got any performances you'd. Have you got a top 5?
I've certainly not got a top 5, John. It's a very hard thing to do. It's like asking me my top 5 best Beatles songs, but no, I don't really have a top 5, but The Truman Show really does stand out for me, because it was sort of the turning point in his career as an actor, as a more taken serious actor. Back to back, it led to the Man in the Moon right after it, and to win the Golden Globe 2 years in a row was phenomenal for someone that was pigeonholed into the comedic sort of genre. But I mean, it didn't put him off staying true to his roots. When he came back with Me, Myself and Irene, which is another Farrelly Brothers film, very much in the same vein as Dumb and Dumber, and what was that film called, the one with the bowling that Farrelly Brothers did with Bill Murray and Kingpin. It was very, very similar in its humour, and I like Me, Myself and Irene for that, and it didn't stop him. He still came back and did another brilliant performance the following year in The Majestic. If anyone's not seen that film, it's a very underrated film. It's a very underrated performance as well by Jim Carrey. It's a really good film. Anyone out there that's not saw The Majestic, I can't recommend it enough.
Yeah, I mean, Me, Myself and Irene, fantastic film. Obviously had a split personality, so even though again it was perhaps returning to his roots, he was doing some more serious role than what he had done in his previous comedy films. But I'd just like to touch upon the stand-up. I don't think we actually went into this in great detail. Just leading back into what we were discussing before with Andy Kaufman, you can see the inspiration that man had on him. He was an incredible stand-up comedian.
Yeah.
A couple of the roles, I forget the fireman one off the top of my mind, the name, but it's unbelievably funny. It's actually popped up in recent times. There was one where he was in aerobics.
He played the female. I mean, you've got to excuse us here. We're only seeing these things fresh. As I said, we weren't exposed to this when it was out in the US and Canada. And you're right, when you look at these performances, you see the originality in these characters. I can't remember the name of the fireman off the top of my head either.
I just remember the catchphrase, fire retardant.
That's right, yeah.
And it was badly burned.
And it really was very funny as UK viewers watching this the first time around. But no, I mean, it certainly did mould his career in those early days, and as the 90s rolled on. Bruce Almighty, which came out in 2003, was another one. It was one of those films that I didn't really think would be that good, but his performance and his energy in the film as well carried it, and I think he stuck to his roots again in that film, and also introduced us, certainly here in the UK, to Steve Carell, who I felt he was on par with Jim Carrey in that film. Some hilarious scenes in it, and Jennifer Aniston as well, another great comedic actor. That was a great film as well. It kind of showed at this point in his career that he wasn't afraid to dabble, in the serious roles and his comedic roles simultaneously. I'm just looking at his resume here just now, and following on from Bruce Almighty was a series of unfortunate events, which was more a kids sort of movie with a kind of dark tone. Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, which is one of my favourite films from Jim Carrey. Such an original idea, the film. If anyone out there's not watched it, I'll not spoil it, but it's a very original piece of film. And
incredible, those two films you just mentioned I haven't seen. I've not seen a series of unfortunate events or Eternal Sunshine of a Spotless Mind, and I have heard, I don't know why I've not seen it, because by all accounts it's one of his best films. Again, he should have got an Oscar nomination, many people would say.
Jim Carrey in that film he plays a very subdued version of himself. He's actually said in some interviews that that's what he's like when he's not performing. What I think what he means by that is when he's not what people expect him to be. He's a subdued person himself, and he certainly was in that film. And then on the back of that, Fun with Dick and Jane, which was a remake. We went to see that in the cinema when it came out, John. A couple of standout scenes in that as well that were hilarious.
Yeah, most notably the robbery scene. I think they go to a car showroom and he dons a black lycra suit and starts doing robotic noises and hand signs. Of course, when he steals the lawn from his neighbour's garden, and then the sprinkler scene where they're so poor and they're having to resort to showering in the front garden with a sprinkler. I was in tears, physically in tears, laughing at this film, and I don't think anything perfectly sums up the humour of a Jim Carrey film better than that.
And I think that Jim Carrey was going through this time in his career, and the early signs should have been there when he did the remake of Fun with Dick and Jane. As good as it was, it wasn't an original story, a film from him. It was the follow-up with Yes Man. A lot of people panned this film. I thought it was actually not too bad. It wasn't certainly up there with his past comedic roles, but it certainly was a decent attempt of a comedy film. And then the critically acclaimed I Love You Philip Morris, that starred with Ewan McGregor, was a very touching movie, and it showed a more sensitive side to Jim Carrey. I mean, there was wee droplets of humour in there as well, and Ewan McGregor was a match for him in the film as well, as far as the sort of dark sort of comedy in the film. But it was an interesting film to watch, and obviously that was the same year he did A Christmas Carol.
Yeah, and I think that perfectly exemplifies the real versatility of the man, and also the brave decisions he's willing to take in his career. The fact that he was willing to play a homosexual alongside the equally brilliant Ewan McGregor. Not so much of an issue in this country these days, but I know in America it's a little bit more conservative with that sort of thing, and it took a brave decision. It could have possibly damaged his career going forward, but he made the decision. It was a fantastic performance and a really good film. Personally, from my standpoint, I've never really watched a Jim Carrey film and came away thinking that was a really bad performance. I don't know about yourself, Stephen, but I've not watched any poor films from him. I haven't seen all of his films, admittedly, but from the ones I've seen, he's always delivered a fantastic performance.
There was a wee dip in his career, maybe about 6 or 7 years ago, where he did this film called Mr. Popper's Penguins. I watched this. I didn't even go to the cinema. I always made it a point to go and see a Jim Carrey film in the 1990s and the early 2000s.
This was his Adam Sandler Netflix period, wasn't it?
Yeah.
The Fat Elvis period.
It really was, and it wasn't a great film at all. For an actor like Jim Carrey to even subject himself to this type of film was baffling, and he didn't help matters, with the next film he did with Steve Carell, which should have been a really good film, but it was absolutely terrible. It was The Incredible Burt Wonderstone. Anyone that saw that will know what I'm talking about. Anyone that's not seen it, don't see it. It's not very good, but
yeah, I mean, thankfully I've not watched those two films, and certainly not be making any plans to watch them anytime soon after that. But I mean, yeah, he's definitely had a little bit of a dip since his heyday in the 90s, and
yeah, I mean, I think that he's one of these guys that's either up or down. And he's obviously had a bit of personal tragedy over the last couple of years in his life, which we don't really want to get into, but it certainly did have an effect on his career as an actor, and his consistency as a very good comedic actor. But saying that, you know, he did come back with a bang in 2013 in Kick-Ass 2. The film itself was not a patch on the original, but he was one of the standouts in the film.
Yeah, I mean, it was a short cameo role, which did disappoint me a little bit. Looking at the trailers, I thought he was going to have quite a meaty role, but I don't think it was helped perhaps with his promotional part of the film, where he was coming out and saying, I'm very anti-violence, I don't like guns, and then he's starring in a pretty violent film.
Yeah, as Colonel Stars and Stripes, yeah.
Is known for violence, does carry weapons. So that kind of hindered the promotional side, and I do feel like that's maybe...
It was a bizarre one from Carrey, wasn't it? Yeah, because you're thinking, you know, Kick-Ass 2 is not an original movie. It's obviously a sequel to a very violent film in the first place, you know, and obviously his sort of PR at the time when the film was...
It was a bit strange.
Yeah, it certainly was, you know.
But certainly the looks, I love the prosthetics in it. It was a very different, again, role for him to take. But moving on from that, I think we've got Dumb and Dumber 2, haven't we?
Yeah, Dumb and Dumber 2 came out the following year. It was one of these most anticipated sequels of all time as far as comedy films go. You're talking a good 20 years. I think it might have been exactly 20 years since the original came out, and I don't know what it is, but Jeff Daniels just looks exactly the same. The guy is not aged. Jim Carrey in the film aged quite a bit, obviously, but
yeah, I'd say Jeff Daniels looks better now than he did 20
I mean,
years ago.
Maybe not his hair right enough, but I think
still got it.
I think the film itself was probably a big letdown to all the fans out there that loved the original. That's not to say it's not a good film. As a standalone, it's a decent comedy. A lot of forced humour. Try to repeat some of the jokes from the original, but I remember when the film was in talks, there was a point where Jim Carrey walked away from the project, and I'm just wondering if he looks back on it now and wonders if maybe his first instincts on doing sequels, which Jim Carrey was never really famous for doing any sequels or going back and reinventing the characters that he did in the past, apart from Ace Ventura. So I don't know what his thoughts on that is, but my thoughts are it wasn't as good as a film and a comedy film as the original was, which is probably one of the greatest comedies of all time.
Yeah, I mean, you can't, I mean, it's a very, very, very difficult film to follow up, isn't it? It's arguably one of the greatest comedy films of all time, not just comedy films, films in general, with the incredibly dynamic comedic duo of Jeff Daniels and Jim Carrey, and also the amazing original Farrelly Brothers script. It's very difficult to come in and, you know, better or repeat.
I mean, I don't think it was anything down to the performances. I don't know if I know the Farrelly Brothers, it was their film again anyway, but I don't know if it's maybe they've lost a wee bit of their magic, or maybe, you know, the humour itself, it belongs, you know, in 1994. I don't know, but it was just something about the film. There was a couple of scenes that were very funny, you know.
Most notably the intro.
Yeah, I mean, that was, you know, being in that sort of paralysed mental state for 20 years, you know, was a good way to carry the story forward. But as I said, it wasn't a patch in the original.
I think that just about sums it up for Jim Carrey, really, doesn't it? One of my favourite actors of all time, certainly one of my favourite comedic actors of all time. Yeah,
I mean, it's something I don't really say about the man enough, but he's one of my most favourite entertainers. You know, not just an actor, but an entertainer, because he's got this energy that I've not seen in many actors, possibly since Robin Williams.
Yeah.
And you know, I could watch the guy on a chat show and, you know, just be totally mesmerised by, you know, what he's saying, what, you know, his actions, and it's very rare you see that in actors or in personalities these days.
I mean, just briefly touching on what you said about the chat shows, I actually forgot to mention the Saturday Night Live thing, where him and Jeff Daniels in the lead up to promoting Dumb and Dumber 2, they done that hilarious skit where they were in a fast food place and he had the plastic hands and he was dipping them into the chip fat.
They did do a very good promotional of the movie, you know, and it showed that the two of them had this special bond after all these years. Jeff Daniels has went off in a different direction as a serious actor, and he's a very good actor at that. Jim Carrey, as we've touched on, has played some serious roles in between the two Dumb and Dumber films. And it was just very good to see that both actors have remained friends after all these years.
Well, everybody, we're getting to that stage of the show now where we like to dedicate 5 or so minutes to a movie review. This week's is going to be the Milos Forman directed Man on the Moon. As we touched upon earlier briefly with the Jim and Andy trailer, this is the film which acted as a precursor for that method performance from Mr. Carrey. Jim Carrey's been a theme of this week's podcast, and we thought we'd like to continue on through to the very end with the review as well. I've of course seen the film before, but with the release of the aforementioned Jim and Andy trailer, it did really pique my interest to go back and give it another watch, and you know, it's every bit as good as I remembered it to be. It's of course a biopic that follows the career of Andy Kaufman, the eccentric comedian or entertainment artist who really came to prominence in the mid-1970s. I think I described Kaufman as the living embodiment of Marmite in my written review of Man on the Moon, and this is really the perfect description of the man. He has a very abrasive, often cruel humour which seemed to split audiences right down the middle, and this film is certainly no different. So if you don't like or enjoy that unique brand of entertainment that he championed and pioneered, then you certainly won't get anything out of this film either. As the story goes, it beautifully weaves its way through his career from the early awkwardness in small grubby bars where the high-pitched Latka character was buffed, through his breakthrough appearances on Saturday Night Live, his time on the hit TV show Taxi, and right all the way through to the end with the tragic diagnosis of lung cancer. It's not all roses and butterflies by any means though. Forman brilliantly balances the positives of Kaufman's art, comedy and personality with the negative aspects as well, such as his wanton lust for cruel jibes, and that is really something that's perfectly highlighted in the Tony Clifton character that he created, who was an obnoxious take on a Las Vegas performer that really became an oddly schizophrenic type separate entity altogether, which is actually still in existence and performing to this very day. Likewise, the extended look into the professional wrestling stint that he did, where he watched it on the TV and decided this is something I want to do. That really perfectly embodied the positive and negative sides of his personality, the determination to succeed at anything he put his mind to, but also again going back to the cruel jibes and really targeting a specific part of society without them being fully aware that they were in the middle of an act or art. Likewise, the kayfabe beef that he then had with Jerry the King Lawler, one of the more prominent wrestlers at that time, highlighted his love of publicity and stunts. I like the way it delved into his private life as well, really highlighting the effect his art had on colleagues, close friends, and also the strange relationship with Lynn Margulies, who he met on the aforementioned wrestling tour, to the point where when he announced he actually had lung cancer to this small group of people, they genuinely believed that it was part of an act or a stunt. Jim Carrey is utterly incredible in Man on the Moon. It's an Oscar-worthy performance from the man. He did receive some flack for overacting and hamming it up, so to speak, which is an opinion that personally I really do disagree with. I thought it was incredible. He got all the mannerisms, the voice, the look, the behaviour down perfectly. Kaufman was his hero. And it's a fact that's immediately palpable from pretty much the first scene right through to the end. And as we mentioned earlier, if you want to see an example of just how close he got to portraying Kaufman, you can go onto YouTube and watch the plethora of different comparison videos that have popped up there since. The other two performances that stood out were Danny DeVito and Paul Giamatti. They both played colleagues, close friends, and incidentally DeVito actually was a close friend of the real Kaufman. And just one final little thing I'd like to touch on with the actual cast was the real nice touch that they did with bringing back the Taxi actors and having them reprise their roles as the characters on the show for Man on the Moon. That was a nice touch. And yeah, overall, much like the man himself, this is a Marmite film. You'll either get great enjoyment from it if you enjoy the humour and the odd personality that he had, or you'll not connect with it at all and find it probably boring and a little bit uninteresting. One thing it's definitely for sure one can't be disputed is the direction's beautiful. The performances are, on the main, brilliant. The REM soundtrack is fantastic, and you know, just the overall dive into such a complex man's life is a very interesting viewing indeed. I can't really recommend the film definitively though, for the above reasons. If you are interested in watching it, what I would maybe suggest is watching the first 20 or 30 minutes, and you'll know from that whether it's going to be something you'd like to continue doing or whether you're enjoying it or not. Personally, I certainly enjoyed it a lot, and I think it's one of Jim Carrey's best films in his career to date. Well, that's all we've got for this week, everybody. But if you're enjoying the content from Movie Burner Entertainment, then we do urge you to like the videos, subscribe on YouTube, follow us at Movie Burners on Twitter and Facebook, and pop on to movieburnerentertainment.org for all the latest reviews that we're putting out and other little tidbits of information. Thanks for listening, guys, and goodbye.